Reading for this morning serves as the basis for our sermon. And so please, in the interest of time, pay careful attention as we read about the crossing of the Red Sea, that stupendous miracle which God performed for his people of old. We read from Exodus chapter 14, verses 10 through 31. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone. Let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to the one side and light to the other side, so neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He made the wheels of their chariots come off, so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back into its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and the horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. When the Israelites saw the great power the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant. This is the Old Testament of our God. For this morning comes to us from the book of Romans, chapter 5, verses 12 through 15. Now understand, Paul's dealing with the Roman congregation who has that Gentile, that Greek background. And the Greeks, the Gentiles, believe the common philosophy of today. You get what you deserve. You get what you worked for. And so if you get heaven, you must have worked for it. And if you go to hell, well, don't take the blame yourself. You got to pass that on to God. All right. Paul is trying to help these people understand that God operates by an entirely different situation, a whole new setup, a whole different standard. And he says, what I'm going to tell you about is how God forgives us through his Son, Jesus Christ. Because what you couldn't do for yourself, Jesus did for you. And all those wrongs, all those sins, all those screw-ups that you should be punished for, God punished his Son instead. Now he gets in our text to a very difficult explanation for the people. He says, but you have to understand, before there was a law, you couldn't say you broke that commandment. Except Adam and Eve were told, don't do this, and they did it. Okay, so they broke that law. But he said there was still sin. You still did what was wrong, but the Ten Commandments hadn't come along yet. Now that the Ten Commandments are there, all they do is reinforce the fact that we fall horribly short of what God expects, no, what God demands of each and every one of us, absolute perfection. So that's where we pick it up in Paul's description and discussion with the Romans. Romans chapter 5, verses 12 through 15. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all men, because all sin, for before the law was given, sin was in the world. But sin is not taken into account when there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even over those who did not sin by breaking a command, as did Adam, who was a pattern of the one to come. But the gift is not like the trespass. For if the many died by the trespass of the one man, how much more did God's grace and the gift that came by the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ, overflow to the many? This is God's word. Was recorded by St. Matthew in chapter 10, reading verses 24 through 33. Out of respect for the gospel, please stand. The Holy Gospel is a portion of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. In the end, he's driving home to the people the thought, now, remember how important you are to God. Even though you're frail, even though you're sinners, you are immensely important. So important that I'm going to lay down my life for you. You are so important that we give no thought to the birds that fall. God does. We have no idea how many hairs or lack of hair we have on our head, but God knows. He said, you are so important. God keeps track of you individually, personally, not as a mass of humanity, but one by one by one, as his children. Hear these beautiful words recorded for us in Matthew chapter 10, verses 24 through 33. A student is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the student to be like his teacher, and the servant like his master. If the head of the house has been called Beelzebub, how much more the members of his household? So do not be afraid of them. There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the light. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the rooftops. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid, you are worth more than many sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before men, I will disown him before my Father in heaven. This is the gospel of our God.